the Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2004 established a appeals process and required FEMA to respond to appeals within 90 days. Did FEMA comply with this requirement in the months after Sandy?
No, sir. We exceeded that, and we had to beef up and bring in more staff and grow that program to handle the caseload. It wasn't until, I believe, January this year that we cleared that backlog and are currently meeting the requirement to be within 90 days or less.
How many appeals during this window were not responded to?
Off the top of my head, Senator, I'd have to respond for the record. It was in, I believe, more than the hundreds. I think it was in the thousands, but I don't have a specific number.
You know, we've asked this question and we're told that you don't track this data. If that's the case, that you don't track the data on the program, it's necessary to understand how it is or is not working. And if you don't track this information, I don't know how exactly you know there's a problem until it gets so big that you realize there's a problem. And if you track the information, it would give you an opportunity to intervene earlier in the process before you have a problem. But one of my big problems here is the consequences, right? So the law says it's 90 days. And if you fail to comply with the law, then leaving disaster victims in limbo for months isn't only bad enough, it also jeopardizes their legal rights. Because FEMA is arguing in court that the one-year statute of limitations for lawsuits begins when the right your own creates a first denial, not after the appeal process is complete or a proof of loss is filed. Now, an average citizen without a law degree, they're going to assume that they should wait for the appeal to be completed before they go ahead and file a lawsuit. So while disaster victims are waiting 4, 5, 6 months or more for FEMA to rule on their appeal, the window for their legal rights is quickly closing, especially a person who isn't versed in the law, which actually creates, I'm not saying that you do it, creates potentially a perverse incentive for FEMA to delay so that appeals are reduced in terms of the number of lawsuits.
Well, Senator, we have no incentive not to pay claims. The normal time to file your claims is within 60 days of an event. We've expanded that to 2 years. We're trying to, as many cases as we can, address the backlog of appeals. The statute of limitation case which you state, quite honestly, is what the attorneys have determined working with justice, but that does not preclude a judge from determining the statute of limitations doesn't apply in this case in these lawsuits. But in most cases, I'd rather get the cases resolved and not have to wait for legal remedy.
Let me just say, you may not say you have an incentive, but at the same time that FEMA is not meeting its deadlines under the law, it is strictly imposing deadlines on policyholders. In fact, 270 claims were summarily rejected because the policyholder, who had suffered through the second largest natural disaster in our nation's history, missed one of FEMA's imposed deadlines. So we have the ultimate hypocrisy and double standard here. You don't have to live under the deadline, and there's no consequence to you for, not you personally, no consequence to the agency for not meeting the deadline, but there is a consequence for the policyholder for not meeting the deadline. That's when people think poorly of their government.